start just by defining a couple of things that are important to me, because I have two objectives today. One is to tell you that you need to watch your blood sugars. And number two is that you want to consider bacteria. Right? And I want to repeat this several times while I'm talking. They are going to sample you with a couple of recipes which I am not really expecting you to like. All right? So I know that you're relaxed, so I'm going to unrelax you with the recipes that I have done for you. And let me tell you, each one of them will represent something that applies to what I'm talking about. Number one is you will sample a sauerkraut that is actually homemade. So this is not artificially done. It's actually bacteria that have worked on this. And the point that I will make to you is that bacteria are actually becoming very important to everybody, and very much in particular in cancer management, number one. Number two is a seafood. It's actually a shrimp. So if anybody has a shrimp allergy, please don't touch it, okay? But the fact is that it makes a point that there is no carbohydrates in this particular dish, because carbohydrates elevate your blood sugars, and I will make a point to you about that. Number two is that it's actually marinated in lime juice, which is very strong to you. And that actually makes you put up a lot of saliva, which in people who are undertaking treatment will make a point to you. So it's very strong, makes you produce saliva so that you can be in the digestion of this food in your mouth. Number three is that will be accompanied by a tiny little dash of habanero pepper. And the point that I will make to you is if you don't like chili pepper, please don't take it, because it's going to really make your mouth inflamed. But what I try to do by this is that I want to activate your taste buds so that you can actually taste better. So all these recipes has a reason to be. There's something behind it that makes it exist. And that's what Cooking with Cancer is about, okay? So if they cut me out because I talk too much, and that's true, then please message. Check your blood sugars, and number two, think bacteria. Okay, now, so let me just go through this. This, by the way, is a conference that has been given before and has been supported by UAV, the American Cancer Society, of course, Culinar, which is the place that I went for, becoming a chef. And actually, you can go to the American Cancer Society and you can download this. And the point that I will make to you is that we are in a crisis of diabetes, and I will show you how diabetes influences cancer, and I will show you how cancer is going to become a serious problem to this country pretty soon. Second thing is the Institute of Medicine is something that you can go and you can download a whole slew of information with regard to bacteria. And it's an interesting point, because this study by the government bacteria was at one point in time a defense issue. And they tried to establish exactly what are the bacteria that exist in the human body. So we all now know everything that is about bacteria and what bacteria affect you like. That's my hero. So you remember this guy, right? The movies, and that rat that can actually do these beautiful things about it. A little example of cooking with cancer. This is actually a jalapeno pepper soup. And you will say, God, yes. And the point about it is that The pepper contains something that is called substance P, which is a neurotransmitter that goes to the brain and basically keep you from being nauseated. As a matter of fact, there is a medication that uses a pre-medication for chemotherapy. I'm not going to tell you the name, but basically it does exactly the same thing. And in my brain, I thought, why do I have to use a $400 medication when I can actually prepare this soup that will cost about maybe 50 cents that will do exactly the same job? And that again, what Cooking with Cancer is about. Now, talking about the blood sugars, and this is the cells, you know, the human cell, and then the human cell has these little fellows in here that is called the mitochondria, and the mitochondria is basically where the cell uses your nutrients to form energy, okay? It's a very important place. Now, I'm going to impress you with the way I talk and the way I'm showing it to you. But basically, when you eat, you have, when you eat, you eat proteins, and then you use carbohydrates, and then you use fat, and you can see where it goes through inside of these mitochondria, and eventually at the end of this, it produces something called ATP, which is energy, and end up producing oxygen and water at the end of it. Now, that will start making some sense to you because you hear about the antioxidants, right? Because at this point in time, when you have an abnormality in this process, which is what I will show you in here, and again, I'm trying to impress you, but the fact is that because of these antioxidants, you will see that in here, it forms something called mTOR. And I don't know how many of you guys have heard about mTOR, but mTOR is a gene. It's a gene that is caused by the hyperpopulation of oxygen radicals, and mTOR is directly associated with you people, with what is called breast cancer. And most of you, if we were to assess the cells that you have, they will have this mTOR abnormality in it. So you can see where what you eat eventually tells you what is going to happen to you. And that's what my whole thing is all about. You know, I'm not pretending to change anybody. I'm pretending to change the nation. I'm being respectful about it because I think that culturally, United States is doing something wrong with the way we talk and the way we walk and the way we eat. All right. So it doesn't show very well, but actually it's a beautiful recipe that is red beet. And you know, it is red beet. It has tons of antioxidants in there. The darker the color of the product, the more antioxidant exists in it. Okay. Now, this is briefly to say this is the status of obesity in the United States, and you see that unfortunately here we are in the highest levels of it. It's children and adults in Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee. We have an incidence of obesity of about 35%, okay? And it's because we have changed the culture. And the culture is as simple as this, you know, it took 2.5 million years to walk, and then the last 50 years we are watching television and eating. I'm not going to mention the name of the places because otherwise somebody's going to shoot me with this, you know. But it basically has to do with the culture of this country, okay? The children basically sit down and then watch television all the time. And we have a problem because we go to exercising, but look what happened to this exercise place, right? The guys are using the electrical stairs to go to the fitness thing, right? You know, and tell me if it is not true. You know, you know, my wife, I think she's watching this on the internet, and she's going to get mad at me when I say that she always looks for the closest space to the entrance to the supermarket, right? And she kind of goes around and around trying to find the closest place. And I said, well, why don't we just park about a couple of miles away from here, and then maybe we can walk a little, right? So that's the culture that we have, okay? Now, another cooking with cancer thing, this is not my recipe, but look at the beauty of it. It's just lemon, and it's cured with salt. And then it cures for several weeks. And then I clean it out and take the flesh out, and I've been left with the actual skin. And this skin has all an acidity, most like the lime that you would try, and basically it squeezes the saliva out of the glands, which makes it for you to be able to digest and eat correctly. How many times people with cancer will tell you, we put something in our mouth and we chew and chew and chew, and this thing gets larger in my mouth and I cannot even swallow. And it's because they don't have the element to do things the right way. Okay. Now, so obesity, we thought that maybe the fat cell was a storage, kind of like a bank. I have some excess money today, put it in the bank, so I swell up my bank account. That is not true, right? Because basically these cells produces all these kind of things, including insulin, growth factors, and all these things that do affect the way the cell will behave. And very briefly, I will tell you that the more fat that you have, then the more inflammatory cells that you have in the area. And inflammation is the new science of medicine that basically tell you that chronic inflammation is what induces the peroxides or the oxygen radicals. I know that I'm going too fast, guys, but I'm trying to be, on time for you. I know that you're hungry and you need to get on going with this. This is an ice cream, and this is an ice cream again for people who are taking the chemotherapy and they get inflamed in their mouth. Ice cream is a way of facilitating food entry because it's cold, it melts in your mouth when you try it, and then you can even pass through it medications. And I will show you a very interesting experiment that one time I did. Again, inflammation as part of the reason why, and that the point that I was trying to make to you, and that is the mitochondria, this is the oxygen radicals, and then eventually you develop into cancer in here. So there is a relationship between that, making it complicated again for you. This is what is called the glycemic index. And glycemic index basically means that what you eat causes blood sugars to go up in your system. And the easier it is the absorption, typically glucose, the higher the blood sugar it will go. So the point, however, is that creates an increase in the levels of insulin, and the increase in the levels of insulin actually causes the mTOR transformation. So these days, the issue that is happening to the endocrinologists is that we know that we needed to treat diabetes one way or another, and we treat them with insulin, and now we know that insulin actually is part of the problem, because diabetes 2 is actually an insulin resistant, and these people already have higher levels of insulin, and then we add more insulin to it, and that had the tendency to induce chromosomic abnormalities. So that's the reason why now you see in the industry of pharmacy how people are producing this new drug that actually makes you urinate the sugar, right? It's not touching the insulin. It's just basically trying to reduce the sugar that way. Now, why that is important in cancer, and I will just show you momentarily this, and this is something called the PET scan, and I'm sure that a lot of you people are familiar with this. And PET scan, basically, it is a introduction of sugar that is radioactively labeled, and then we can actually detect the cancer by looking at the area where the cells with more activity will incorporate the sugars into it. And that, the point that I will make to you is that cancer cells preferentially uptake sugar. So whenever you people are eating things that contain sugars, refined carbohydrate, to some extent you're feeding that cancer. And that is what I am going to make the message to you today. You like your bread, I'm so happy that you do. You like your candies, I'm happy that you do. You like your ice cream with a lot of sugars in it, I'm happy that you do, but you're doing the wrong thing. If you like something, you have to use bread that is whole grain, that has the husk in it so that the absorption is lesser than that. But you have to learn that concept. This is another beautiful thing. This is a granita that I made with blueberry. And you know, blueberry is such a rich thing with this. And it's so simple because this is just a frozen thing, right? You put the juice of the blueberries and you just move it into this pan and it forms this ice that is flavored, but it contains all these kind of antioxidants in it. Diabetes and metformin, just a point to be made. Metformin is the only drug that does not work by increasing your level of insulin. Metformin changes actually the metabolism at the level of the liver, and it's actually being used today together with chemotherapy in breast cancer because it has a protective effect against cancers of the breast. So whoever diabetic with breast cancer, you may want to mention this to your doctor. In oncology, we are using that in actually studies that has shown that indeed metformin and chemotherapy works better. All right. Now, just a little change. Now I'm going to talk about bacteria, and this is just a representation of how many bacteria we have in our body. This is the so-called microbiome, in which basically we have typed all the bacteria existing in the human body. And then we know that we have more bacteria than we have cells in our bodies. We have millions, trillions, and trillions of bacteria. They are in your eyes, they are in your skin, they are in your mouth, your nose, everywhere in your body. And they have a function for you because they will actually interact with your immune system. You think that you know what is happening, that basically the flu is coming, and then we get the flu shot, which should. But what I'm going to tell you is that the bacteria of yours had already gone ahead of you and a step before you, and actually had gone into your intestine, and at the level of the intestine has gone into these lymph nodes called the Mayer plaque, which is a lymph node, and at the level of that, they interact with the lymphocytes in it, and they exchange the genetic information related to that. So you're actually prepared ahead of time. Not only that, but exercise your immune system so that you can actually fight not only infection, but you can actually fight cancer better. And that's the way it behaves. You have the bacteria in here, you have the lumen of the cells, and then you have all these immune-related cells that basically transfer all this information through the immune system. So bacteria are becoming important to you. As a matter of fact, when we use antibiotics to you, and then we kill the normal bacteria, we give you an infection by something that is pretty bad, right? Clostridium difficile. Clostridium difficile is the crisis for the hospital. Staph is the crisis for the hospital and has been created by the fact that we have used too many antibiotics. Funny enough, and I'm going to say something that you're going to have lunch in just a second, you know, but I will say something to you, and that is for people who have these chronic infections, now the treatment of choice is actually transplantation of bacteria. So they actually go on and take normal people's stool, and they basically isolate the bacteria from it, and they give it to you. And they restore the normal bacteria flora in your system. which is basically what keeps you alive. And it's funny to say it. It can be even exaggerated to say it, but it's true. That's the way we are treating these things. Nowadays, whenever they give you antibiotics, they always tell you take probiotics with it, right? Because they are basically trying to avoid the killing of too many of the good bacteria on it. I'm assuming that you don't like me anymore, right? I can smell that was in here, and you can see how strong that is. But again, it's meant to be for cancer patients. Now, I will say to you that if you go to New York and to one of those fancy restaurants, you will find these type of things in it. So I'm going to go relatively fast to this. Again, how important it is, these bacteria into you. This recipe, by the way, is another beautiful recipe, so simple but so true. And this is actually a black bean ice cream. And you will say, black bean? Why black bean? Well, black bean has a lot of fiber. And the fiber is actually the food for the bacteria. They call prebiotic. So whenever you, and the industry is going into that, they are trying to sell you these fiber products because that is a way of maintaining your own bacteria fed. Again, I apologize. I'm going to go fast just because I know that the time is very short. This is, the concept of the prebiotics, and basically it's fiber. By the way, the whole grain bread, which has the husk is fiber, right? So it is being impregnated with these things. Pumpkin ice cream, another beautiful thing. I love what I do. I really do. Every recipe that we come up with has a reason to be, has a beauty to it. They are pepper in the inside, but let me just tell you what I did with this. This is a watermelon water. And actually, I extracted the redness out of it. So it's a filter thing. So I can fool you because I can show you this and you wouldn't know what it is. And then you try it and you will say, this is watermelon with pepper. It's very stimulating. This is the book that we have. It's already old. Very likely some of you people have noticed it. There is another one coming up that will be much more complicated, which is something that I hated because I personally think that this was very simple to read, simple to go through that. And the one that I'm writing right now, which is co-sponsored by UAB and the American Cancer Society and Culinar, I already have about 500,000 references in it, right? It just doesn't make any sense for common people to have to read those type of things. And of course, they always change doctors. They change me whenever I try talking to people about changing the diet, because I really think it is true. And then just finally, just to show you, this is one of my daughters. This is what happens at my house. I have a daughter who is on the back. She is, with Cooking with Cancer, and she's the CEO of it, and she's a chef as well. And then this is the youngest daughter who cooks with us too, and I have a son who cooks with us too. And the only problem with that is that the wife typically takes her time and then just do nothing. She just watches. She's watching me. Beets again, that is roasted. But what I want you to show you in particular is that right here is a little chunk of blue cheese, right? And you know what blue cheese is, right? It's actually a cheese that has been injected and infected with funguses, right? And it's a very, very strong tasting one, but it does have a lot of probiotics to it. So with all respect to you, if you are given antibiotics, you forgot your prebiotics or probiotics, and you're having diarrhea, get a chunk of this, and that will take care of you, okay? Final one, this is Guatemala. I'm not being paid by the Guatemalan Tourism Institute, but it's just to say that that's my beautiful country with a lot of volcanoes all over. And I should say just my country because United States is my country. Whenever I go to Guatemala, I feel the need to come back after 2 or 3 days of being there. It is always erupting volcanoes. You can see that. I can see the volcano erupting from my very home in Guatemala City. And just the last slide, this is my home in Guatemala City, and these are my parents. And my father is 96, my mother is 92, and they are, they are different cultures. My mother used to walk to the market for a mile carrying the bag of groceries every day. So they are still alive, and they're still doing these things. So, all right, I have to close it. Thank you for your patience. I can talk forever. There are many other topics that relate to nutrition and cancer. Look vitamin D, look vitamin C. All these things are very important to it.